Hey everybody, welcome to For the Record, which is a conversation series presented by Grey Matter, where we talk to music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. As always, we like to start at the beginning and would love to get a sense of you, like your origins, where you're from, where you grew up, and when your relationship with music started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was like any other kid. I basically, this is actually a really common story. I feel like inevitably their music taste is shaped by their older sibling. So I had an older sister who probably went through any number of middle school emo phases. And so we always had CDs in the house that were of, all the pop punk bands at the time. So, Green Day was my uh, the first album I heard that had a curse word in it. She was big on the Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco side of things, um, and then like 182 reunion tour,
Nice.
which in retrospect was a cool first concert. And like any younger sibling, I got all this game for my sister, and I thought, I want to kind of make my own identity and kind of make it in opposition to what she was into. So I started like looking at my own music. I like made a Pandora station. I think I ended up getting into a lot of like alternative rock music at the time. Still all the very mainstream stuff like, you know, the Chili Peppers. I heard Sublime for the first time, and you start forming an identity there. Before like I started really getting into, I think digging a little deeper, listening to like my band's favorite bands or the solo projects or side projects of the bands I listen to. And for a long time, it was like very rock based. Um, then I started to get really into hip hop, and once you kind of break the door of identifying yourself as like a one genre listener, you're like, oh well, if I like two very different styles of music, I'll probably like others. So I started getting into like folk
Mm-hmm.
music, and then pop music, and then slowly like electronic music, and it was such a natural thing. Like I loved my first concerts. I started going to more concerts when I was in college. I went to Berkeley, and there was a really good live music scene. Uh, my best friend Sean, who talked on the show before, he lived in Santa Clara, so we would meet in the middle in San Francisco and just hit shows kind of every week, every other week. I joined my college concert kind of production department. So we were the group that put on shows for students. All of our shows were free, and we were a public school with a tiny budget. So inevitably, we ended up booking much smaller acts. Where other colleges were probably getting like ASAP Rocky and Schoolboy Q and kind of classic big
Mm-hmm.
names that were like touring the college circuit at the time. We were all like digging and trying to make bets on who could we afford now that within 4 to 6 months when they actually played our campus would be way bigger. So we ended up booking names like Mitski or Freddie Gibbs or Kalani, like kind of before they ended up being as big as they are now. Um, and that was
Mm-hmm.
a great experience because it made me dig deeper to be like, okay, like how do I find out who's like bubbling under the radar? And that led me to music journalism, where I ended up reading all these blogs, and I kind of got interested in it. And I was like, I feel like I could do this. It was really not something I thought I'd want to do for a long time. I kind of just like stumbled my way into it. And so now, my relationship with music is kind of built on all those things. I still listen to a ton of music. I also have been working as a freelance music journalist for a while, always in accordance with my day job. I did a couple like full time stints of music journalism, mostly for Stereogum. I've written for uh, Passion of the Weiss, Bandcamp Daily, Vinyl Me Please. I have like one Pitchfork article there. A handful of places, and it's just like a great way to keep engaging and tapping into this interest I love at like a more deeper level um, than I'd get to do without it. When you're working a day job, you listen to music a lot more passively. So I think that having this outlet to listen actively, kind of shed light on the artists I think are really cool and like diversify, I think, the number of voices that do typically talk about music. Because when I was growing up and reading music journalism, it was relatively homogenous, and now it's like there's so many more voices, and like the discourse is so much richer. And so I like to get to be a part of that and participate in that, and hopefully shine a light on artists who otherwise wouldn't get a lot of coverage on their own.
Totally. So that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, the state of music journalism is actually something something that we can commiserate over, I think.
Whatever the state left is, yeah.
Yeah. Freddie Gibbs, it was like, oh yeah, this guy's gonna be big. I'm curious, like, what your approach was to that, and then how that is, how that has evolved as you dived into music journalism and as you decide which artists you want to champion, which artists you want to contextualize and focus on. How's that changed over the years?
Yeah, and I mean, I have so many thoughts of this. I'm not, I haven't worked professionally for like a booking agency, a festival. I haven't worked for the Spotify's of the world. I haven't worked for kind of labels, but I feel like a lot of what everyone is so distracted by right now is the data. Like it's so easy to be like to this is quantifiably popular um, without looking into any of the context. So, you know, uh, I do think this background informs how I listen and think about music too. Is my day job prior to I'm in grad school right now, but prior to grad school, I worked at this company, Ideas 42. That's like a nonprofit behavioral design firm, and so a lot of how I think about the world is informed by psychology and economics and thinking about like what motivates people's behaviors. And I'm just amazed often when and this would happen in college too. We'd be in our meetings, we were a student group, so we'd have these like long booking meetings where we'd say like, okay, people are bringing ideas of who we should bring to campus and what we expect the attendance might look like. And people would always say, well, they have this many people who follow them at the time, like Facebook follows were an indication. They've gone this much coverage in the press. They've this many Spotify monthly listeners, and that data is important and useful. But if you never like bring it back down into like the local place that you are operating within and thinking about
Mhm.
how people actually engage with that music, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Like a lot of these festivals are that are kind of like booking an algorithmic lineup of people who have tons of Spotify plays, but like zero fan engagement, uh, zero recognition of, or like zero excitement of like why they like that artist. It's so different to listen to a song every month because it's on a playlist and you're like, yeah, the vibe of it's good, it has a good groove, but you know nothing about the artist. You wouldn't actually move that to, dragging yourself out of your house to take a 30-minute bus ride to get to the venue and wait in line and then, pay for a drink once you're there and be home late. Like all these things that actually require some sacrifice. And I do think our engagement with art should require sacrifice, but so many people think of it as like, you know, capturing a theoretical market rather than the market that they
Hmm.
actually exist in. And I'll say, I feel like, I'm thankful that I have a lot of friends who work in the music industry, and a lot of them I feel like are, young people like me who are grinding out because they love and care about music. But it feels to me like the higher and higher you go, the more it seems like these people don't even know anyone who listens to music because I talk to so many of my and far more average music listeners than me. They're not kind of like checking music blogs. They're not reading, or they're not like, if like an artist that they love announces a new single, they probably don't even know about it for like another couple days. Maybe they're on a mailing list, so maybe they'll find out directly there. Maybe they're on social media and like something's trending. They'll be like, oh wait, I know that band, that singer. Um, and when I think about like what people are like, oh, this person's so popular, this person has so much clout talking about,
Hmm.
because they're not really paying attention to like what actually music at the end of the day is like an emotional thing, and if you're only looking at like engagement but not how much a song or an artist or an album has actually moved people, you're not going to be able to translate whatever that engagement is to tickets sold, records bought, so on and so forth.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to what extent do you think that gap in awareness is a product of the limitations of the tools that we rely we rely upon to get this kind of news, like this kind of zero sum game, algorithmic platforms that we have. Like, to what extent are they at fault for the limited emotional connection and awareness that we can cultivate and foster around artists that we love? Like, is there something lacking there? How do you maintain these emotional connections, or discover these emotional connections in the first place with new artists?
I think it just requires being curious, but even just zooming out a little further, I think it's all types of if you are, you know, a knowledge worker in society, if you're the kind of person who works a laptop job, you get your kind of casual, what's the word? Fast casual, fast food. You get like your sweet green salad because it's nearby and it's fast and it's easy. You are listening to your daily mix on Spotify because it requires like very little thought or engagement, and you're like, oh yeah, it's like reinforcing and like basically regurgitating back to me what I already know I like. What's that big feature? Everyone has been talking. All my friends at school have been talking about the day list. That Spotify's like day list feature. Every day they type in day list on the search bar. They click on their day list, and Spotify spits out some funny titled playlist that's based on your listening habits. So it's like, oh yeah, on Tuesdays you love to listen to like indie sleaze meditative soul, and everyone loves screenshotting that, putting this on their story. But they don't actually like they don't it's fun to have like it's fun to play with algorithms, I guess, and it's fun to kind of have to strip away a lot of the normal friction and decision making that's involved in your day-to-day life. But I feel like the more we do this, I mean, people talk about this from all angles, right? Like the more your social media is just a reflection of your bubble, the worse that is for, both your mental health and also your like engagement with broader society. The more you're kind of pushed and nudged towards certain businesses in your community, the less you're supporting local businesses, like building a relationship with your neighbors. I think all those things are connected, and the same is true for music. If the only way you engage with music is you have a machine continuing to pump to you what you already know you like, one, you're not going to grow
Mhm.
as a person. Like so much of art is about challenging yourself and growing as a person. But you're
Mm.
also going to keep getting like boxed and boxed further in, and not really form much of like a meaningful relationship with anything. There's so many
Mhm.
artists who have so many, hundreds of millions of Spotify plays. But if you ask someone like, are they a band or one person? Where do they live? Do you know any of their music prior to this one song you know? They'd probably say no. And I think the sad thing is most people would say, oh yeah, like I love music. I'm a big fan of music. But this is the way they engage with music. And I don't blame individuals. I really do think it's like a social issue, and I don't think the solution, like there's going to be people like me, probably people like you, who are always going to be curious, hunting, digging, like putting in the extra effort. But the average person who used to put in like like a little more effort, uh who, if they wanted to discover a song they like, they had to like rub against some friction. That's gone now. You can just kind of get a good enough without putting any effort. And yeah, I think it's all connected to this like hyper ease of life that we've kind of built for ourselves. Um,
Mhm.
and so I don't really know exactly what the solution is, because if I talk to my friends on a day to day basis about this, they're like, "Why are you being such a curmudgeon? Like, you know,
Yeah.
algorithms are great. This is like, I love a lot of the music I find. Like, this is really good." Uh, and to some degree, it is like it is satisfying a need for a lot of people, but I think it's a need that like society has reinforced that we should be wanting more so than something that's actually of benefit to our relationship with the world around us. I hope that didn't go
Yeah.
too pie in the sky, like philosophical there.
Oh, no, no, not at all. It's kind of what I was hoping you'd do. You do, so it's great. Um, yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot. It's kind of like the containers in which we operate, and like the convenience of good enough. And as platforms continue to, as the algorithms get better and better, like uh, they know a version of ourselves well that is then perpetuated and shown back to us, and it becomes this like weird mirror effect. And our reliance on these like huge platforms is detracting from our ability, or our even awareness that it's happening, that we're like have less agency, whether we think we do or not, than we used to, in like the music blog era, where you could go out and that's how people discovered music, and it was like more agency involved because you were still choosing where to go listen to music, who to read, like which blogs were writing about which scenes, and then you could go find the music. But instead we're just like skipping that whole step, that whole contextual step, going straight to the platform and letting us dictate the entire process, the entire experience. And it feels like
Yeah.
it's go ahead.
Well, I'm just so much because what you're just saying resonates so much, because so much of loving music and art is discovering something unexpected. And
Mm-hmm.
I think anyone who was, a music fan from like being a teenager on knows what it's like to basically be faking it till you're making it, right? You're like, oh my God, this person is super cool that I respect and admire. They love this really challenging noise rock band that is so different from the stuff I listen to, but I want to be like them, or I like them. I want to at least like try it. And then you listen
Mm-hmm.
to it and you're like, I don't know if I like this, but you have to convince yourself kind of that you like it. And then so you give it another listen, and then you're like, oh, actually, well, this is like pretty good. Like I'm kind of craving this. Like this is cooler. It opens up part of your world. And so much, I feel like even with movies, right? A critical art house movie is rarely going to be the type of thing that it's a Sunday afternoon and I'm bored and I'm gonna like reach for it involuntarily.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's like, oh, I read a magazine, I read about this movie, oh, my friend really loves this movie, my friend has good taste, like I should go for that. Versus now it's like you turn on the TV, well, here's like the 5 top trending things on the streaming service of your choice. They're all been kind of curated for you, so they show up first, and all the other stuff that might be more challenging to you is like buried. And the same is true with music, right? You might listen to 100 songs a day, but if you're only getting them from your daily mix, well, you're actually listening to such a narrow band of what's out there, and it's stagnating, right? Like taste should be something that we're continuously developing and refining. Um, if someone at the age of 11 was trapped with the taste they had then, then for the rest of their life, they would go to restaurants and only order like chicken nuggets and ketchup. And I think the same is true of like if you're a teen right now, and like let's say you like fall in love with, you know, like Lana Del Rey or something, who I love. Lana Del Rey is great, but like let's say you're a teen, you're on TikTok, you're like, oh, Lana Del Rey is like the thing I get plugged and pushed a bunch, and then you continuously only use algorithms from there on. You're only going to get
Mm-hmm.
fed like that, like Lana Del Rey core of music, and you might never get to the stuff that like Lana Del Rey loves. You might never get to the different branches of music that kind of exist beneath her, are like in the extended universe of people she collaborates with, or stuff that she probably grew up listening that informed her taste. Um, so I think the more passive you are with how you listen to music, right? Like just the more stagnated it is. And I do think we're gonna hit uh, a point where it's also like right now it feels like it's great for business, like it's business versus consumers, but it's going to be bad for businesses eventually in this industry if listeners are no longer curious and don't have taste, because
Mm-hmm.
the amount that you can sell them is going to decrease, and the amount of which in which they're engaged is decreasing. And you see it like every year everyone's like, oh, festival lineups get worse, oh, the there's like the curation's so much worse than it used to be. And it's in part I think because people are just listening to so much less than they used to. And even different, like festivals used to be, oh, I'm about to learn about a bunch of artists in the smaller font who I didn't know before, but I trust this brand to come up with cool people who
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't know about, and I'm gonna get excited to dig into the lineup and then attend and suddenly discover my new favorite band from this. Like no one's really excited about that. They just immediately recognize any names and they go mid. Um, or they see it and they recognize all the names but they don't have any like deeper engagement with any of them. So like, oh, am I actually going to pay $400 to see 20 bands who I only know one song of?
Yeah.
Like, probably not.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you want to take a pull line from that, it's just like streaming algorithms are making us all consumers who only eat chicken nuggets, and we're never going to sell like risotto.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, I love the chicken nuggets line. It feels spot on and like um particularly resonant and particularly evocative of what's happening. I feel like one of the issues is like places like Spotify in the like the platform incentives of like how they function. It doesn't matter to Spotify who you listen to. They don't care, if you're challenging yourself and listening to something that nobody else is listening. They only care that you're listening to something that you're consuming on their platform. Like same with Netflix or any of these, uh, kind of aggregator platforms that just host everything. Um, and like you can feel the context becoming more and more abstracted when you hear things like, oh, I'm gonna go watch Netflix, I'm gonna listen to Spotify, as if like this thing, like this media conglomerate is the thing that you're consuming, like it's actually showing up in our language and the way that we talk about it, rather than the piece of art that we're like all the intention about like our experience with art is being abstracted away, which feels really unhealthy.
Yeah, the medium is the message, right? Yeah, we listen to
Yeah,
Spotify. We don't listen to the actual artists on Spotify.
is a message. Uh, it's yeah, very true. So yeah, it's going to take a lot of energy to um, push back, I guess. Because these platforms wield a lot of power, and it's going to be difficult to like resurrect something like a blog era. Although I think that there is a growing appetite, and it kind of starts with the artists themselves, because I think they're the ones that are getting screwed, the most out of this. Like as context dissolves, the emotional connection that is required to cultivate, relationships with the fan base, erodes. I mean, the money in like the streaming area, during the streaming era was never there in the first place. So if it's no longer a connective thread either to like more opportunities to lean in and cultivate a fan base, like it's pretty useless, from an artist's perspective.
It's like but I have faith in part because I think all these things are boom and bust cycles, right? Trends are cyclical, and eventually people are going to get, there's this moment in time where it's so exciting to be a part of a monoculture. Like there's like this death of a monoculture. Like at the same time as it's harder and harder to break through because no one's really challenging their taste anymore, we are all like fragmented into our own different spheres. And so there's a lot more, I guess, variety in what people listen to. Maybe like a perception of that than there used to be. For a period of time, I kept reading this idea of like the monoculture is dead. We're not all tuned into the same things.
Right.
Um, and I think that was definitely overblown to some degree because if that was true, we wouldn't get like a Taylor Swift level phenomena where every single person on the planet is somehow engaged in her lore, antics, and music, and business decisions for that reason. I think that though, if you're talking, especially as I get older, it is lonely and isolating to be listening to things that no one else is listening to. Like when I try to engage with my friends in the real world outside of blogs and maybe high school friends I still have who we are all kind of on the same page about how we listen to music. Like the people immediately around me, if I want to go to a concert, it's been so hard. It used to be this practice of mine where I would buy 2 tickets to any concert I want to go to if I didn't have already a person in mind to go with. And I used to be able to always get rid of that ticket, like invite a friend, find someone to go with, because I could say, hey, like, do you want to come to this show? Uh, I'd find someone who either knew the band or a style of music and be willing to like stretch. But as we get older, people have less time. Also, everyone's like so again deep in their own worlds of music. I like
Mm-hmm.
can't find anyone who listens to any, a $20 ticket for a local independent music venue. There's so few people I can count around me who might be interested in that show anymore. And
Yeah.
sorry, this is like a really like I feel like my brain is connecting like a lot of dots right now. It's just sad to me that I also feel like so many of my friends when they think about live music, like they inevitably think about Ticketmaster. It's probably the only platform that they've ever bought tickets on for live music because they haven't gone to like smaller local independent venues or shows. And I think that eventually there will be a little bit of a pushback on this, like this ease of convenience. People want to kind of feel a little bit more on the cutting edge of something in their lives, and if you're the type of person who all your tastes have like become homogenized by the platforms you use, people can sniff it out. Like, oh, you don't really actually have like taste, or you know, you don't want to be called quote unquote basic, right? And so that
Yeah.
pushes people to maybe then stretch a little more. And I try, I think the worst thing you can do. So this is like literally like 7 points in one, and none of them are fully formed out. But I do think the worst thing you can be as someone who's in love with music is condescending person in your friends' lives, where they don't even want to talk to you about music because every time they're like, "Oh, I love this band," you judge them aggressively,
Uh-huh.
and it doesn't really create a safe space for someone to nourish their own excitement about music. So I try
Right.
really hard to when someone's like, "Hey, do you love this band?" The other day, someone was like, "Oh, hey, do you want to go see Black Pumas with me?" And I came up with some excuse why I couldn't go because I think of that band as like very, uh, Grammys core, middle of the road, which I kept that opinion to myself. But I was like, "Oh, I'm like, that's so cool that you're going. That's awesome. Like, I can't go to that, but maybe you'd want to go to this with me." Like, I try to, be that person who's maybe pushing people's taste a little bit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it becomes harder and harder. I feel like some of my friends are just they're telling me the things they love, and I feel like it's getting harder and harder for me to be uh respectful of it because I'm like, "Oh, I know exactly how you ended up here. The pathway of
Yeah.
discovery is all the same. If you pick the
Yeah.
average person on the street, you put them in this room and you ask them like, what was your journey with music? You know, it increasingly is going to be like half the people are going to have the same journey. Which I listened to some stuff in eighth grade. I listened to them on Spotify when I got a Spotify account, and all that eighth grade stuff has now like I've been spit out several like variations of that stuff I listened to in eighth grade. And this is also why the last extra point I'm gonna add on to this monologue. This is also why festivals the festivals that are doing the best right now are like the Lovers and Friends, the When We Were Young festivals, because people's tastes have become a lot more static. Product like a Coachella or a Bonnaroo or an Outside Lands that like tries to hit every genre and capture like the general all-purpose music fan, there's not as many people who are willing to spend that much money because no one is digging and learning as much as they used to.
Yeah.
Instead, it's oh my God, you got every single band I listened to in middle school. Well, that thankfully this company I haven't really listened to anything else since what I listened to in middle school because the people who are in their, early to mid 20s now who are starting to go to a lot of these shows and have the energy to go to these shows, they've all grown up with the majority of music discovery happening to them, not like they're not doing it themselves. It's happening to them. So
Right.
I don't know. That's what you end up with. I'm disappointed by a lot of like what is popular right now in the music industry, but I to circle back where I started, like my hope is that eventually people get kind of tired and there's enough of a pushback because people are wanting something more. You can tell there's like a dissatisfaction with a lot of what's going on. Um, Not everyone wants to be like a pop stan on Twitter, freaking out for their favorite idol. And if that's
Right.
the majority of what Spotify is giving you, if I open my Spotify and Spotify is only telling me to listen to Drake, The Weeknd, Ariana Grande, Taylor Swift, Um, Eventually I'm going to be like, this doesn't feel, I'm going to start reflecting on myself and say, wow, like I should push myself a little harder. That's what I'm hoping will happen. I think it's connected to everything else. Like I think knowledge workers gain dissatisfied with their jobs, people gain dissatisfied with social media and wanting to go outside more. People feeling like they're disconnected from their friends and wanting to introduce more spontaneity in their lives. Like all those things are connected to eventually
Hmm.
feeding us, but guiding us towards like a more active, curious, excited music fandom, um, that had existed in the past.
Yeah, perfect. I love that. I love that. Yeah, I mean, I share your hope, and I'll leave it there because I think we could talk about this for the next 3 hours and commiserate on the state of. Yeah, it's all connected, as you said. I'm just gonna leave with you.
You know how
There.
you can tell how easily I could talk about. I could just continue to rant about this uh,
Yeah,
for
me
hours on
too.
end. Yeah,
Me too. I need to hold myself back right now. But on that note, I think it's also a good segue into more of the what you're listening to part of the episode, and I'm curious first how you discover music.
yeah, yeah. People, I within my like social circles, people, think of me as like the music guy, which is kind of in a way also sad that more people don't self-identify as like the music people in their friend groups because we're all actually, if anything, I think we're all listening to more music than we used to. But I think
Mm,
people concept in people's lives.
right.
Um, so that's going back to our old conversation rather than how I discover music now, which is and we might be disappointed in the outcome a lot of these tools, but I do think in a way these tools themselves are not like they can be really conducive to music discovery. Like I use Spotify to organize a ton of music around themes. I make playlists. I like share those playlists with others. I often will like hit up some group chat in my phone and say, "Hey, I'll often frame it like, hey, I want to like know what you guys are listening to. Let's like create a 20-song Spotify playlist each and just send it to each other as like a little mixtape exchange in a way." Um,
Hmm.
and that's really helpful because again, if you trust your friends' tastes, if I have friends who I really like their tastes, I know that they listen to stuff that's different than me. And that's like, I think the single best way to do almost anything in life, but especially with music too, is just ask your friends and engage with them on like a deeper level. Like we have so
Hmm.
many people in our lives who can offer us so much, used to just engaging with everything through the internet nowadays. Like if you're looking for a job, talk to your friends who know cool people who are doing cool things. And people don't think about that. They like go on Indeed and cycle through several algorithmically sorted posts about like what's out there in the world. Um, if you want clothes, like everyone thrifts now, but also everyone like donates and throws out a lot of their clothes. I'm like, I don't know, like get excited to like share things with your friends. I'm one of the few people who still buys, I think, physical books. Like I buy a copy of every book I read, which probably the environmentalist in me is disappointed by to some degree, but I don't really believe that individual action alone is the most important thing anyway. But one reason I love doing that is I'm like a library for people. If I love a book and I recommend a book to someone, they're like, "Oh, I'll go check that out." I'm like, "Actually, you don't even need to. I have it right here. You can get it from me right now." And I'm not precious at all about people like bending the pages and like I like when people like wear out my stuff. It shows that it was used. It was put together. Someone actively engaged with something I loved and care about. And so the way I do it and the best way to do it is to ask your friends, find people who also are engaged or like want to be engaged with music and send each other songs when they come out. If even with friends of mine who I don't engage with music as deeply or it's not like a core part of our friendship, if a new song comes out and it's like related to something that I know they like or I just like it makes me think of them, like I send it to them and it's like a little expression of attention. Um, And I think also like activates that identity for them, right? Like if all you do is listen to music on Spotify on your own and not really engage with others, like of course you're gonna get trapped in your own taste, and it's also gonna end up being a lot more dissatisfying. Versus if I tell you, hey, I thought of you when I heard this song, you listen to the song and you go, oh well, like wow, you thought of me, like maybe this is part of my identity too, like you're helping people expand their own notions for themselves. Um,
Mm,
and then the other half of it is read blogs. Save this dying industry, and in part because I don't know, when you're thinking about where your taste comes from, because everyone's taste is going to come from somewhere, unless you're going out and about in your own town and listening to all your local bands and only listening to the local stuff in your community. You're going to have to find out about music through something. Like I can't figure out what's going on in like French rap or Nigerian rock music. Like that's not something I have any ability to learn about independently living out here in Chicago, but I can find people I trust to like curate that stuff to me, right?
mhm.
There's tons of journalists online who are doing this for basically no money anymore, still just putting on stuff that they love. I don't think the Substackification of music journalism is necessarily the right trend, but follow if you like writers and they have a Substack, like buy them a cup of coffee, for that price, you can get their thoughts and their
Right.
recommendations on a bunch of stuff that's really cool and important. And I don't know. I think anchoring your taste around your friends and then around people in like the public sphere who you think of as cool is just going to always make your life more satisfying and show you way cooler things than a company ever will, right? Like if you look at all your tastes and see they're all coming from major corporations, like that should be a moment of reflection. Like unless if that makes you happy, then we're probably not going to be friends. And if that, makes you dissatisfied, good. Like channel that energy, go a little deeper. And even like I don't know, most underrated music tool, Shazam. I'm out and about and I'm always Shazamming things. I'm like at a bar, I'm like, this song is so cool, I Shazam it. I'm at a party and I hear something, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna Shazam that for sure. And no one does that around me. And maybe I shouldn't be like, so I'm sure some people do that, but it's so easy. It's the easiest form of music discovery is to hear something you already know you like because you're hearing it live and then just remembering
Mhm.
it for later.
Yeah.
And if people spent 1 ounce of effort doing that the same way that like they'll read a blog of the 10 best restaurants in their uh city and then seek them out, like they would just be so much more interesting to people and it's way cheaper.
Totally. I mean, I use Shazam all the time. Yeah, I agree. It's a hugely underrated tool. I've discovered entire scenes through one song on Shazam, and then a little bit more, diving into it. So totally, I agree. Um, cool. Okay, what's the first album, if you can remember, that you ever purchased, and then what is the most recent that you purchased?
Yeah. So I'm going to stratify this somewhat. The first one I ever purchased online digitally was the Blink 182 Greatest Hits album because I was,
Cool.
a teenager, again, informed by my sister's taste, and we were going to go to that concert. And we went to that concert, and I was like, wow, this band is awesome. This is so sick. Travis Barker was like almost going like 360 degrees in this like elevated levitating drum platform, and that like blew my mind as a kid. um so I bought that with like an iTunes gift card right away. But I do think a better answer in a way, and I think just as honest, is that I bought, because this is like reflective of our whole conversation, is that I bought the John Frusciante solo album, the guitarist of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, his solo album, The Empyrean, because I knew I liked the Chili Peppers at the time. I was like, this guitarist is amazing. I learned he had solo music, and then I learned that at the time the most recent solo album he had put out was The Empyrean, and like I read a couple like reviews online about it, and people were like, oh my god, it's like beautiful and gorgeous and so different than the Chili Peppers. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, like let me just take a chance. I bought it, and the CD booklet said like listen, I don't remember, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like listen loud with the lights off or something. And as a kid you're so much more susceptible to just like doing something even if it's kind of silly, like your uh your self-awareness, or like I don't know, self-embarrassment, whatever the term is. I was like, I'm doing 100% that. I turned all the lights off in my room. I only had computer speakers at that time, so I put my computer speakers on max volume, and I played the CD from front to back, and I just didn't do anything. Which
Cool.
even now, like as someone who I think is like really who puts a lot of premium and value on listening to music, like thoughtfully and engaged, I can't remember the last time I've ever listened to an album front to back and did nothing else at the same time. You know, it's like
Mm,
harder to find those moments. And I think
yeah.
that's like truly one of the most like formative music experiences I had because that album is so different than like the Chili Peppers. It's like a lot more grand and orchestral and not really orchestral, but like, you know, like 7 minute compositions of like ambient guitar, space, and this like he sings in this super deep voice. And so that was like the perfect example of I knew I liked this one thing, so it's gonna lead me to another thing, and I'm gonna lean into it even if I it's so different than everything else I like. And so when I first heard it, I'm like, do I like this? I don't know. But I just wanted to be like, this is amazing because everyone was telling me it was amazing. And then I just kept listening to it. And I was like, oh, wow, I actually do think this is amazing. Um, so that was like a very formative first album that I bought, like,
Totally.
you know, physically. And then the most recent album I've bought, it must be a record that I've bought. I'm trying to think what I bought on vinyl recently. Um, Probably based on the shows I've been to. There's this band, Say She, who I saw in Chicago recently. It's like three women who are kind of music that a little bit more informed, I think, by like indie alternative pop stuff. That's the most bland description I can give, but it's really good. Great group. And when I saw them live, it's just the three of them on stage, trading lines, riffing, uh, kind of having this almost like diva-like presence. And I thought it was awesome. And I like had heard a couple songs of them when I decided to go see the show. And then I was like, okay, I'm definitely gonna buy your album because this is great. And so I bought the record, and it's like one of my like favorite. Such a satisfying feeling is discovering a band who you know is going to be the next recommendation you give people for like at least a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Where if someone says, "Look, what are you listening
Yeah.
like what like send me something new," I'm like, that's the first thing I send because I think it's and they're getting bigger now too. And that's also, you know, people love standing Taylor Swift and being like, and again, no disrespect to Taylor Swift. I love a lot of Taylor Swift, but people, you know, are so excited, like, oh my God, she just earned this record or broke through in this way, and she just debuted at the top of the charts, and people are like excited about that, and I'm like, it's so much more fun to be excited about the career milestones of a much smaller uh, group where so many of these things aren't assured. Like, I discovered
Totally.
this band less than a year ago, and you know, now I see them popping up on festival lineups, announcing bigger tours that are selling out. They're releasing new music. They suddenly collaborate with someone I think is really cool. Like that feeling of watching artists grow over time is so much more satisfying uh, at this scale of music listening than it is for, you know, the major figures of today. So,
Yeah.
you know, it sounds pretentious, but I definitely promote and plug trying to be the early adopter of things around you and be the person.
She's doing these things. I mean, sure. Like again, yeah, as you said, no disrespect to Taylor Swift. What she's accomplished is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's no way that like if everybody, like all whatever 100 million of her super fans of all the Swifties, she is like if they cultivated their taste, they would still love Taylor Swift as much as they do.
If not
Uh,
more, right? Like you might discover new things you like about
right?
her music.
Yeah, even
You
more. Yeah.
listen to a bunch of other stuff and you see she's engaging with things that you didn't realize were also like happening simultaneously in music. Like instead of discovering Phoebe Bridgers and uh, Girl in Red and whoever else opened for her tour, like the smaller artists she's like kind of assumed under her wing, like instead of discovering them through Taylor Swift, the national, like whatever, I think it's so exciting for me when I'm a fan of an artist and then I suddenly see them collaborate. Like 6 Point Never,
Mm.
there's room for him to be both like the weekend's executive producer on his Super Bowl performance and work with him on his albums, and there's room for him to make his, super out there zany solo records. And if you like him and you see him suddenly collaborate with this huge figure, it's like it feels like rewarding in both directions. You're like, oh, I like The Weeknd, and now he's doing cooler things, and I like um Tricks, and now he's getting that bag and also making the pop landscape so much more interesting. Like it's just more
Yeah.
fun to be a fan from both directions rather than only top down, where like all your tastes are filtering from like the trickle down of Taylor Swift. Not
Right.
to equate her to Reagan, but um,
The trickle, yeah, I mean, the trickle down of Taylor Swift should be a book that somebody writes.
trickle down Swiftonomics or something.
Yeah, there you go. Please write that book. Okay, so maybe I already know one of these artists, but 3 artists of note that you heard for the first time in the past year-ish.
Okay, yeah. So uh Say She is definitely one of them that I would plug and hope people listen to if they're listening to this conversation. And then let me see. I I really love I know very little about him, but a big part of my music listening and especially my music writing is just trying to focus on South Asian artists because because it's a lens I can uniquely contribute to music journalism. There's a handful of us who are from South Asian backgrounds who maybe have a little bit more perspective, both like personally and like just from listening to a broader range of music in this community, like to opine about. Um, but also because I feel like some degree of uh, pride seeing brown people doing really cool things in culture when for a long time that was like not nearly as visible. So
Hmm.
this producer Anish Kumar um, makes like I've just discovered his album mixtape by Anish Kumar, very simply titled, and it's full of bangers. And it's one of those things that I'll throw on like a drive with friends or if I'm at a friend's pregame. And when someone like gives you the aux, you kind of freak out a little bit initially. You're like, oh, I hope I don't kill the vibe. I hope I don't play a thing. Like you're like, should I just go to the lowest common denominator? Should I just put on a Drake song because everyone's gonna know it and have a great time? Anish Kumar is one of the easiest ones I can throw on to like. I'm like, I know most people here haven't heard him, but I know this song slaps, and I know that people are gonna like ask me immediately who is this when they hear it. So
Wow.
big plugs for him. Um, and then a third person I've been listening to recently. I'll throw on just because I was listening to it right before this call. I'll throw on Spiritual Cramp. Um, Sick band. They're opening for military. Good lineup. If you like, you know, heart racing rock music, go to the Military Gun tour. That's hitting so many cities. It's gonna be a good time. But Spiritual Cramp are like I don't even want to like give just like put on their album and listen. I feel like a lot of the people, it's not at all this type of music, but a lot of the people who probably first heard Future Islands and like heard
Hmm.
that guy's singing and like the like physicality and like muscularity of this music that's like still very catchy and accessible. I feel like Spiritual Cramp kind of hit that vibe of like it feels like very meat and potatoes style music, but a lot more nuanced and artfully done, maybe than other stuff operating in that vein. So I'll throw them in there too.
Cool. Cool. Good trio.
I
Um,
would also I got a shout out because he's a at this point a personal friend, and also I'm writing about him and have I think 2 articles coming out next week about him. But listen to Lapgan. He's Chicago producer. He's working with Heems on Heems' new album that comes out next week, and I was a stan for him well before I met him in person. So it's both like a personal shout out, but also like I truly am a organic fan and consumer of his music. And if you like Madlib, if you like the kind of sample heavy hip hop that is really dominating in the underground right now, he's like doing for Indian music across the continent what hip hop producers have been doing for a long time for like jazz and funk and soul records from the 60s and 50s and 70s. So shouts out Lapgan. Check it out.
Cool. Yeah, Lap Gang got a lot of love in the Sean episode as well. And I uh, went and listened to his stuff afterwards, and I became a fan. And I have since now shared it with 2 or 3 other friends, which is, kind of the idea of this whole series is to
This is the ideal.
spur these, this connective tissue. So more love for Lap Gang. I love it. Okay, most underappreciated artists from your favorite music decade.
Okay, most underappreciated artists. Oh my God, I have to really think about that one. And this is also one of the things where it kind of helps to uh, have something like Spotify that for a lot of people like tracks their listening and gives them a sense of, because I think if you are the type of music fan like us who probably listens to so much stuff, your brain probably explodes with questions like this because you're like, oh my God, there's so many out there that I'd want to like.
I never know what to say. I know.
Yeah. Um, because there are definitely, like there's a lot of names that come to my head that I wish were more popular than they were. Um, but like, do I think it's like, yeah, do I think about this from like a critical level? Like they don't get as much love critically as they deserve, or like a popularity level. I think I'll throw out Torres. She just came out with a new album and she's been grinding like all the makings of a successful indie rock musician are there. Um, the songs, the live presence, the artful music videos and aesthetic. She's put out like 4 albums or something that all I think probably underperformed from what they should have done. And I remember seeing her for her first or second album. I think it was her second album in Bottom of the Hill in San Francisco. Great venue. Shouts out. Uh, it was an awesome show, and that was like 7, 8 years ago. Must have been. Um, and I've loved her since. I listen to every album she comes out, and I'm always like, wow, it's getting better and better and better. But I would actually be surprised if her Spotify listeners or her like, booking fees or whatever, if like any of that has grown that much since when I first heard her. So shouts out to her for continuing to grind and hustle. Her new album that came out a couple weeks ago is called What an Enormous Room. Incredibly underrated. And, you know, she kind of has the pop star thing where she does like a different era with every single album, like a different kind of aesthetic. She's had like industrial cowboy vibes before. I don't really know what the aesthetic of this new one is, but it just like the songwriting is as good as ever. So if you like your music both aesthetically complex, but also just
Appreciate artist.
oh well, I don't know if I would call the 2020s my favorite music decade. Um, so a little bit of ignoring that side of the question, but also every decade has too much gold, and it's probably also based on the genre you asked me about. Um, but also, what? Shouts out our current decade. I think kind of people who've aged out of being curious music listeners would tell you.
Mhm.
I listen to multiple albums every single month that I'm like, this is like every month that make me think, oh my God, is this going to be the best year for music since last year? Like since last year, like it just keeps. If you're curious enough, you're never going to run out of cool things to listen to. So shouts out this decade. People are doing cool things.
Cool. All right, some love for the 2020s. I like that. Um, all right, this is the big one. You're going to a desert island and you get to bring 3 records with you. What are they?
Okay. Damn, I've thought about this question outside of the context of this conversation probably several times. Also because, the classic question, like, oh, what do you listen to? I'm always like, that's the worst question. It's I don't want to sound pretentious and say everything, but also what you want me to distill my taste into 3 things. But
Yeah.
maybe in a way I am also a product of, you know, prioritizing what I listened to when I first got into music probably more than anything else. So, my favorite band for a I mean, today, still my favorite band. My go-to, like, if anything breaks the number one spot, they'll always get the number one spot before long, is Spoon. Spoon is one of the greatest rock bands of any time, any decade. Very consistent. Everyone knows that, but consistency does not also mean that they're not extremely impressive with every single album. And I'm one of the people who's a Transference truther. I think their album Transference, which was for a lot of people like the one misstep in like a crazy run that they had, I think is their best album. I think it has their best songs. If I had to pick one song to listen to forever, it'd probably be Out Go the Lights, which just absolutely goes. So I'm throwing Transference on there.
Okay.
I'd probably have to throw, just for like, range diversity here of music, like I'd probably have to throw some Outcast record on there, probably Aquemini. Because Aquemini is the best one, but part of me kind of wants to do Stankonia because there's such variety of sound on that album. But let's go with Aquemini because you got Liberation, you got Return of the G, and you kind of have, I think, both Andre 3000 and Big Boy at their best on that album. So Quemini, Transference, and then I need to pick something that gives me something different than what those two are giving me. So let me. That's such a hard question. You know what it's gonna be? It's gonna be the first Yellow Magic Orchestra album, which maybe if I listen to for On a Desert Island enough times, I'll find the like kind of computer tone electronic music a little annoying after a while. But this could also have been an answer for underrated, but I don't think they're underrated. They're truly very influential, and everyone who knows about them uh, thinks about them this way. But Yellow Magic Orchestra, like flawless discography. Um, RIP to Ryoshi Sakamoto,
Mm-hmm.
one of the most talented musicians of all time. I think just being able to feel so confident in it, like they know that you're gonna know that this is awesome. Like that's such a cool, refreshing feeling. And that album came out in what, like the late 70s. I still think few people have created an album with as much like magic and joy. So that'll be my third.
Amazing. Well thought, well contextualized, pretty diverse trio of records that you're taking with you. Well done. And served as a reminder that I haven't spent time with any of those three bands in quite a while. So which is another thing I love about this series, is that I get the reminders, not just to go discover more music and like these new bands and new rabbit holes to go down, but also music that I have known and loved in the past that I now get to go listen to again. So thank you for that. Cool. And Pranav, that's the end of the road today. Thank you so much for your time and your energy and your for those who want to read your writing, or pay attention to what you're doing, where is the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, read music blogs, read Passion of the Weiss, read Stereogum, read Vinyl Me Please. I end up on those more often than other places. And I would honestly love more if you discovered something I wrote because you just were curious about these blogs. But I do post about what I do on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter, I don't really post anything but articles because I'm just trying to engage with Elon products as little as possible these days. But I'm at PTREWN on Twitter. And then Instagram, I'm at PSTREWN, middle initials in that one, PS Trewn. I'd post stories about what I'm posting, but you'll find little else on both those social medias besides my articles. So good place to discover my writing. But I think if if I feel like the people who listen to this are probably already well endowed with that message, but something I'll plug for anyone who maybe discovers this who isn't already kind of engaged in like a curious, thoughtful music discovery practice, but like just don't even go to social media. Go straight to these blogs, go straight to your artists directly. I mean, maybe you have to go to their social media to find out what they're up to, but join their mailing list. Like get onto forums that aren't just Twitter and Instagram, because they're victim to the exact same issues we're talking about. Where it's fun to go down your own rabbit hole, but if you do it for long enough, like you're basically blind to the rest of the world. So
Yep.
try to discover new things.
Totally. That's the theme here. Have intention and discover new things, and try to challenge yourself. Go to the source. All these things. And now that you've been through the ringer of For the Record, what other music head comes to mind that we should have in the show? Like you came via Sean, who came via another guest that we had on, and we'd love to keep this string going. Got anyone in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I think an obvious, easy answer would be, if you guys haven't already talked to Gaurav, the musician behind Lapgan. He, in large part, just because, well, him and actually someone, if you want to get international and talk to Nishant, who runs this Instagram, but also store slash like consultancy in a way for older Indian music. He runs this account, Digging Indie. And Gaurav sources a lot of the samples he gets and the music he ends up turning into his own records from Nishant. So the two of them together like are a great team, but they approach it differently. So if you want to talk to an artist about what it's like to recontextualize past music, Gaurav's your guy. If you want to talk to someone about like archiving and doing the work of resurfacing records that might otherwise get lost to time, Nishant, who lives in Haskos in New Delhi. We just hung out the other day in India when I was visiting last month. He's a great person to connect with, and both of them would love to just have these conversations and talk about music for as much time as you give them.
Cool. I would love to chat with both of them and get both of those perspectives. They're both important and both part of this strange, long, exciting process of music and archival and culture and history and all those things, and how they coalesce and mingle and make themselves known. So yeah, they sound great.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to put you in touch if helpful, and look forward to hearing their episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that. Cool, Pranav. Thank you again so much, for your time. Really enjoyed the conversation. This could have as easily been a 3 or 4 hour episode. I feel like we could have continued to, rant and rave, but no, thank you for taking the hour. Thank you for taking the time that you did. It was great to connect.
Yeah, I love this. Excited about what you guys are doing and just making more space for conversations like this. So it was a joy. Happy to be on, and look forward to hearing more.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks again, man. Be well.
Yeah, be well. Bye.
Bye.